This movie is set in Los Angeles at a time when crime rates were increasing at an alarming rate. In the opening scene of the movie, 8 gangsters are seen eating breakfast at an LA diner. While the men are dressed in formal attire, they simply joke around with each other while avoiding business-related matters. The formal appearance of the men makes it appear as though they're coming from a special gathering or going someplace special. They argue for a while about the true meaning behind Madonna's Like a Virgin song, and the conversation later shifts toward women and money. After they are done eating, Joe, the leader of the gangsters, pays the bill and asks everyone else to drop $1 in the tip jar. Everyone pitches in, except for Mr. Pink, who reveals that he doesn't believe in tipping waitresses. He goes on to complain about how he had once worked in an office, but had never gotten tipped because he apparently wasn't putting in enough effort. He reveals that any waitress who wants a tip from him would have to go high and below to make him feel good, and the others laugh at this. Later, we learn that the men have plans to steal diamonds from a bank in what would later be known as the Diamond Heist. We soon discover that the leader of the gangsters, a man named Joe Cabot, and his son, Eddie, who goes by the alias of Nice Guy, had gathered a group of men for the Diamond Heist. The other gangsters are given code names, which include Mr. Brown, Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Orange, and Mr. Pink. Later, we're shown a car with a clean white interior, which belongs to Mr. White. The squeaky clean interior is marred by an inordinate amount of blood, courtesy of Mr. Orange, who's lying in the back seat. Mr. Orange received a gunshot wound in his midsection, but he is held by Mr. White, who tries comforting him. They make it to a safe house that belongs to Joe, which appears to be an abandoned funeral home. In the safe house, White takes care of Orange's wounds, but his condition only gets worse with the passing of time. Mr. Pink walks in at that moment and paces around in an agitated manner while insisting that they were set up. He wonders how the police had arrived in time to stop them and why it seemed like their every move was predicted. But White informs him that Brown is dead, while Blue and Blonde are missing. He also tells him that they need to book the diamonds and begs him to get some medical attention for Orange, who is bleeding to death on the floor. We're taken to a flashback of the past, where Pink is seen shooting his way out of the heist while carrying a briefcase full of diamonds. He walks up to a parked car and roughly drags a woman out of it before driving off. Later, we're shown White and Pink, who fume about how they would like to kill Mr. Blonde, who went crazy during the heist and jeopardized their plan. At the present, Pink and White are seen beating on Nash, a cop they had kidnapped in hopes of finding information, when Eddie walks in and expresses distaste at their actions. He insists that Blonde isn't crazy and that there was no setup. He also orders them to retrieve the diamonds and ditch the getaway vehicles before leaving Blonde in charge of Nash and Orange. When White, Pink, and Eddie leave to hide their cars, Blonde gets some alone time with the cop and Orange, who is now unconscious. Blonde cuts off the cop's ear and tortures him to get some information, but Nash denies prior knowledge of the operation and begs Blonde to let him go. Blonde ignores his pleas and resumes the torture. After torturing Nash for a while without getting the desired response, Nash douses him with gasoline. Just before he succeeds in lighting him up, Orange wakes up and pops multiple bullets into Blonde. Once Blonde dies, Orange tells the kidnapped cop that he's actually a cop too. We're shown a flashback of the past where Orange is seen in a diner holding a meeting with his superior. His superior tells him that they might be able to get some inside information on Joe's next job. We later learn that Joe is one of the biggest criminals in the United States, and they've been looking for a way to catch him for some time. Orange's friend gives him a script to memorize, alongside details that'll make him seem like the bad guy he's pretending to be. Later, Orange is seen practicing the script in a bar, and Joe, Eddie, and White listen carefully as he acts out his script. Orange tells them of how he had almost gotten caught by the cops while selling marijuana for a friend. On that fateful day, he had walked into a bathroom with a bag full of weed. Orange is surrounded by 4 sheriffs and a German shepherd in the bathroom. The dog smells the weed and barks at him, but Orange composes himself and takes a piss. After he was done with his business, he had simply washed and dried his hands before heading out. Joe must have really liked his story because Orange lands the job. Later, Orange is seen practicing his story when Pink, White, and Eddie pick him up. They visit Joe, who gives them code names. The general idea is for all the men to have no knowledge of each other's past or their identity. In the meantime, White and Orange become better acquainted with each other as White tells Orange about how the heist will go down. While we don't see the details of the heist, we're shown the aftermath, where Mr. Brown crashes the getaway car and dies from a gunshot to his head. Meanwhile, White and Orange try to hijack a young woman's car, but she shoots Orange in the guts. Orange retaliates with a gunshot, and we're taken back to when Orange was crying and bleeding in the car while White drives. In the present, Eddie, White, and Pink return to the safe house, but they're stunned to find Blonde dead. Orange tells the others about how Blonde had tried burning Nash to death, but Eddie shot Nash without a second thought. Orange realizes that the other gangsters might get suspicious, so he tells them that he had shot Blonde because Blonde was planning on shooting them after they returned. He further reveals that Blonde planned on getting away with the money, but had murdered several civilians and attracted the attention of the police in the process. Afterward, we get a quick backstory on White, who seems to be an old friend of Joe, the brain behind the operation. Back in the funeral home, White is furious that Joe, his old friend, had employed Blonde, whom he describes as a psychopath. Meanwhile, Pink hides the diamonds nearby. Pink is furious at White for revealing his name to Orange, and the two men start fighting. Pink argues with White over whether to get medical attention for Orange, while the pair draw guns at each other. They stand down after Blonde arrives, but White walks over to him and confronts him. Blonde isn't surprised by White's hostility, but simply tells them that he has a surprise for them, and it's stashed away in his trunk. The surprise turns out to be a cop, whom Blonde had bound and kidnapped. They plan on extracting information on the rat amongst them, and things don't look too good for the cop whom they take inside the safe house. In another flashback, we see Blonde as he visits Joe, the mastermind of the operation, alongside Joe's son, Eddie. We soon learn of how Joe's son has completed a 4-year jail sentence. Blonde views Eddie as his brother, while Joe considers him his son. He reveals that he just got out himself, and Eddie and Joe ask for his opinions on a job that could make him rich. They promise to reward him for not revealing Joe's name to the authorities, despite being offered a lighter sentence. Joe offers Blonde a no-show job, which implies that he doesn't have to be present during the operation. Blonde shows his gratitude, but insists that he wants to get back to real work. Joe and his father agree to his wishes, and Blonde is recruited for the heist. At present, Pink and White are seen beating Nash, the kidnapped cop, while demanding information on the rat. Eddie walks in at that moment and shows distaste for their actions. He insists that Blonde isn't crazy and that there was no setup. He also orders them to retrieve the diamonds and ditch the getaway vehicles before leaving Blonde in charge of Nash and Orange. When White, Pink, and Eddie leave to hide their cars, Blonde gets some alone time with Nash and the currently unconscious Orange. We start to piece different parts of the story together as Blonde cuts off the cop's ear while trying to gain some information from him. Nash pleads with Blonde, who ignores him and resumes the torture. Blonde threatens to kill Nash and pours gasoline all over him, but just as he's about to light him up, Orange wakes up and fires at him repeatedly. Blonde dies, and Orange tells the kidnapped cop that he's actually a cop too. The other cop reveals that he had known all along. And there we have it. That's our rat. It was Orange all along. Back in the present, Eddie, White, and Pink return to find Blonde dead. Orange tells the truth about Blonde torching the cop. He also reveals that was planning on shooting the others when they returned to the funeral home. Eddie shoots Nash instantly, but doesn't believe for a second that Blonde, a man willing to spend 4 years in jail when he could have easily exposed his father for his crimes and received a lesser sentence, would actually betray them. Right at that moment, Joe shows up and tells the others that Orange is the rat, and he's pretty sure of it, but White doesn't believe him. He also threatens to kill Joe if he kills Orange. They all get into a standoff over Orange, and the men stare at each other with guns drawn and pointed at each other. Suddenly, the men open fire at the same time, but Joe and Eddie get shot and the father-son duo bleeds to death. Meanwhile, White is gravely injured, and Orange is still dying. After Pink makes it out of the safe house with the diamonds, Orange feels a sense of kinship for White, who had defended him in the face of death. He reveals that he's actually a cop, but White is hurt to learn of his betrayal and shoots him. Orange dies instantly, but the police, who were already positioned outside the door of the safe house, are alerted by this and walk in at that exact moment, shooting White. The movie ends as Pink is shown making off with the diamonds while every other member of the heist is dead. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out when you do that. And of course, check out the other videos if you like watching recaps.